Thank you for coming to the press conference. I may just start by informing the media that earlier today I sent over a letter containing an additional 6 names to the president. I'm hopeful that he will choose one of the 6 persons to be the next chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, particularly in light of the ruling of the Chief Justice, the acting Chief Justice. Later today, I will issue a press release on the names of those individuals because I want to confirm that his office has received the letter before I make its content public. I've seen comments by various persons that the inordinate delay in the appointment of the chairman of GCOM will not affect preparations for local government elections. But I believe that the absence of a chairman of the commission is an untenable position. The work there in GCOM is totally stalled. They are on remote and automatic mode, and many of the pressing issues that have to be resolved, not just for local government elections, but national elections, which will be upcoming in a short period, those issues cannot be addressed. And so there is a sense of urgency, and it will affect preparations. I saw earlier this week the president, in the handing over of 3 buses to various communities, gave a very impassioned speech about his love for the children of Guyana and how they are our future. And it struck me that this is the ultimate act of hypocrisy on the part of our head of state. That a head of state who with a straight face tells a crowd of people that he cares about our children, that is why he's making available resources for them to be transported to school. When in the simultaneously, his government put a tax on education and educational materials, so private education, but educational materials for all school children, from which they were exempted for many, many years, because the People's Progressive Party never had a tax on education. But he did this. His government threatened to stop the graduates from the University of Guyana if they did not pay the student fees, the student loan. They stopped them from leaving Guyana if they did not pay the student loan. The threats to them, being forcing them to pay. This is the same government that stole $1.6 billion, $1.67 billion from our children, claiming that they did not have money to fund it, when they took away the $10,000 per child grant, and that grant was largely to assist with education, but could have found tens of millions of dollars to build a fence around State House, to repair hundreds of millions to repair the State House, the office of the Prime Minister, to take a 50% salary increase for ministers, up last week to find $4 million to send one minister to Ireland for medical attention, and find $38 million to insure ministers and their families for health care. Just recently happened last week. But they could not find money for those kids to maintain their grant. Now, if you multiply $1.67 billion by three, 2015, 2016, 2017, it gives you $5 billion. That's how much they've taken away from the school kids in this country. If you look at the cost of one of those buses, we could have bought 1,000 buses. 1,000 buses already on the money that he took away, his government took away from the school kids. And he palavers over 3 buses and talks about this care that he has for school children. People have to put this in perspective. There's absolutely no care. If there was care, they would have found money to continue that activity, especially now that they're arguing that the revenue is up. Well, if we could have found money to do that at a lower level of revenue collections, why can't they find the money to do so now when they're arguing that revenue is up? And I've heard them say, Truckman saying, we're going to get $380 million US before oil production come on stream from local spending. So why can't they return the money to the kids? And so it's such a hypocritical statement. Hypocritical. But I've come to recognize that this government deals with hypocrisy on a daily basis. I was scanning the newspapers and I just randomly picked up newspapers from August 19. And let me give you some headlines. Saturday, August 19, Chronicle. I'm going to find you. That's the bold headline. The president says, vow to intercept criminal syndicates. You can't secure a prison and you're vowing to intercept criminal syndicates. And it's because of their action. We've pointed this out, the moral hazard they created, this inept policy, this of dealing with the situation in the prison, that you have made people out there on the run now that you can't even find, but you will find the syndicates. This is the president, I will find them. And at the same time, you have cut the budget of the DPP. The office that prosecutes criminals. You've increased given the Attorney General a budget to prosecute and prosecute political opponents. You've converted SOCU now into an arm of the state that goes after your political opponents, not the money launderers and the drug traffickers. So how are you going to find these criminal syndicates? So this is the evidence. And your Minister of National Security on a daily basis makes the most ludicrous statements that if it wasn't so, this wasn't so tragic, he would have been one of the foremost comedians in the world. And so this is it. On the same day, however, in another newspaper, the Starbuck News, The headline is 19 prisoners hurt in bid to kill informant. And the same day that the president says, I'm going to find you, the criminals. It's so ludicrous, unbelievable. On the same day, in the newspapers, President had credible information that spurred decision. Harman, this is the Kite Show News, Saturday 19th, same day. He was speaking in relation to the President's unconstitutional act of directing the Police Service Commission to stop considering promotions until the termination of this year. Everyone in Guyana recognizes by now the president has no such power. In fact, the Constitution protects these bodies from interference by anyone, including the president. They're independent commissions. Yet, you have another ludicrous statement from a lawyer, this time Harman, saying that the president had credible information. So, credible information available only to the president can override our Constitution now, which is the foremost, the primary law of this nation. Another issue, laughingstock issue. Then, the same day, Guyana finally submits EITI application. Same newspaper, well, same newspaper, same day. And guess who is the head of the local chapter of the EITI? A member of the AFC, or a supporter who is a radio talk show host in New York. Now, that's the least, that is supposed to be the most transparent body overseeing transparency in the extractive industries. And you put one of your henchmen, a thug basically, to oversee this. So I shudder to think about what will happen there. Nothing can be transparent there, because I believe that anything that exposes weaknesses in the government's transparency or transparency will be covered up by these individuals. If you can't be transparent about who you put to even head the local chapter of the EITI, then how can you be transparent about submissions through that process and making public information on the extractive industry through that public? Same day. On the same day, construction of new Demerara Harbor Bridge at Houston to begin next year. And it's a farce. It's a farce. They are talking about, oh, we've done some feasibility studies, we've pre-qualified people, and we're going to select contractors. But where is the money coming from? And what will be the cost of this project? The estimate, if you go with an elevated structure, will probably be over $100 million US. They have no provisions so far in the budget in the past, and I doubt they can put it in the budget in 2018 budget as local expenditure. So no budgetary provisions yet. Are we getting a grant from someone to build this bridge? We haven't heard about that. Nobody is giving us a grant to build it. Or are we borrowing to build it? And no multilateral agency would lend them to start the bridge next year. They have to be satisfied that the process has gone through, which will take about 2-3 years. So where is the money coming from? But we heard, so this project, the new harbor bridge, a long-awaited promise, will not start next year. It's a farce. But we were exposed to this when the minister pontificating in his budget presentation about starting the road between Mabura Hill, or I think it's Linden, to Kurupukari, about 130 kilometers. He said this will start this year too. We're now close to September. We haven't even awarded a contract, and I suspect a contract will take at least 5-6 months if you have the money now to award. So we heard that before. And this money is supposed to come from the British as a grant, but that money is supposed to do the waterfront, to build the bridge across the Kurupukari River, and also the stretch of road. The money is wholly inadequate, and they have not even, I don't think, completed the feasibility study, and we're not even sure that the British will accept a waterfront project. So it's good headlines. It's good headline to give hope to people, but it's nonsense. The same thing like the Harbor Bridge. Let's just jump about a bit. On August 22nd, Trotman says, government concerned about gold smuggling. Now, I thought that was a feature under the PPP. We were facilitating gold smugglers. 15,000 ounces per day, coming up to 750,000 of ounces per year, billion US dollars. The PPP, through corrupt practices, was facilitating this, according to them. I'm surprised under this clean government that we still have smuggling of gold. But I suspect that this is an excuse for the drop in production that they're going to witness this year. This is borrowing from the two new gold mines. So he's already started excusing what will happen and what is being observed. So the reason some of the production is declining is because of the policies of the government. So he goes on to say, I know you've been asking for tax relief on equipment and fuel, and we have been working to have these addressed. Now, listen to this. People, they said they addressed this in 2015. They said they addressed this in 2015, that you're going to get duty-free fuel, etc. So now we are hearing Trotman saying they're working on this to be addressed. But if he just listens to the miners, they've gone past asking for that. They don't want a duty-free fuel tax relief on equipment and fuel, etc. anymore. Many of them are asking to go back just to the regime that they had under the PPP. Because what has changed is that equipment now in the industry, they're subjected to a 14% value-added tax. Excavators, skidders, everything that you use, which wasn't there before. So imagine buying a $35 million excavator and having to pay 14% more of that on taxes. You end up paying $5 million more, or so, more about that. So they're asking not for you something new. They're asking them to remove what they have put in place. And he says they're working on it. Secondly, they're asking them to remove, to go back to the 10% tributous tax, because now it has gone to 20%, 100% increase. So the legitimate miners now who hire people, they have to deduct 20% from their salaries now every month, every time they get paid, to remit to the GRA. It is affecting employment. People don't want to work with the formal people anymore because they don't want this money to be deducted. They increased it by 100%. And then what they did move the 2% final tax. Now it's no longer final tax, the income tax. And so next year, when people start filing their returns, they're going to be hit with a serious devastation. They would then see the full impact of that measure. It has not kicked in as yet. So this is what a minister shows up. He says, oh, we're getting some more smuggling. We know you're talking about tax relief. We're working on this and duty-free fuel. And he ignores the elephant in the room, which is what they did to the mining sector in the last couple of years. The changes. And then to criminalize the non-collection of records, so that if these miners who sit in the forest, small pork knockers, etc., now don't have receipts, they can go to prison for 6 months. They criminalize people's activities. So again, another ridiculous thing. And then another event, another day, he talks about these syndicates getting a lot of land. And we always supported giving land to people. When the community forest in Kwakwani, we brought the community together, 500 people, and gave them some land, a communal land that they can work on in the forestry sector. So we support bringing people together, especially small people, to give them land. But they talk about friends and family. You should check. Somebody needs to do an investigative piece on the friends and families of some of the ministers who are involved in this sector, who are getting this land. Some of the syndicates would wake up the people in the syndicates one morning and realize that the beneficial owners of these syndicates are the friends and families of many of these ministers. Friends and family. So the syndicates now, they are carefully coordinated activities. And I'm fearful that the intended beneficiaries, which are ordinary people, will be just swept on the carpet. And then we saw another ridiculous headline: no need for president to face media. Imagine this. In the United States of America, the biggest country in the world in terms of GDP and everything else, the president has to face the media. We say we're a democratic society, we say we're a transparent government, but no need to face the media. So I just wanted to just do a quick scan of the headlines to show you on a daily basis we have what is tantamount to nonsense coming out from our government. They just talk a lot of things that have absolutely no meaning in policy, or the policy is very, very different. They have no clue about the future. So today I see today's headline, Harman taking a big picture about the bauxite industry, 50 million investment, and we're happy because we've been critical of them. No new investment from abroad for the past, since they've been in office, so I suspect he wanted to say that. But if you read in the bottom line, it says these people started the feasibility study in 2008. In fact, they have the agreement signed since under the PPP time. The agreement was signed since then. And so it is nothing new. It is nothing new, but they're so desperate for success that he has to highlight this. We wish the people well because the project came on the PPP as like so many of the other things that you see rolling over now. Nothing very new. I've seen quite a bit written about the oil and gas industry, and that the whole AFC cabal. Before I go on to that, I just had to mention one thing. It is this comment by Gaskin that the AFC ministers and executives are not bribable. That's another headline. Now, a couple of things. One, he is implying that it got to be the PNC ministers who are bribable, because if AFC ministers are not bribable, it's the other side that are bribable. So, and then he ignores all of these scandals that the AFC ministers are involved in. That it was Trotman and Nagamutu who covered up the contract for the bond when the president put them to review the contract. They're AFC people. Patterson, on a daily basis, you hear the charges, but in every contract, people have to give money. And the big contract is, he controls that ministry. And still not transparent about the meter contract. I can list 10 issues that the AFC members have been involved in. But they're saying it's not us, it's the PNC guys in this coalition that are the bad guys and the ones who are corrupt. But they are all part of the same cabal. So that bribable thing, it's a pure nonsense. Now, oil and gas, as I said. I'm trying to still pin down Trotman. He lacks clarity. He hopscotches around the place. Like if somebody gives him a briefing, a technical briefing, he comes, he memorizes it for a couple of seconds and he gives it to the press. But a lot of these esoteric, sporadic, sometimes unrelated comments, unrelated to the issues, comments that he makes, do not address the core issues in the sector. You have issues surrounding the agreement itself, and transparency issues surrounding the agreement, number one. Number two, the architecture for managing and regulating the industry and its resources. The provision of the architecture. I could disaggregate it a bit more, but I just want to focus on those two broad issues. So let's start with the architecture. The architecture, we saw the government's first attempt to define the architecture for the future, now that we are going to be producing oil and gas. In the Petroleum Act, the bill that went to the National Assembly. And what we saw there gives us no reason to hope that this government will be transparent and will manage these resources in a technical manner. We saw, as you know, in the debate, and you heard in the debate, the minister can appoint the board, the minister can fire the board. If the board is not appointed, the minister is the board. The minister can appoint the chairman, the minister can fire the chairman, and the minister can become the chairman if there is no chairman. And other things too, like he appoints secretary to the board, etc. I'm just giving you two examples. Now this is a technical body, should be staffed with technical people, but that's the role of the minister. So the first element of the architecture has found them wanting, and it betrays a pattern that they intend to get political hands on the oil resources. Secondly, we have heard a lot about local content legislation. But where are we? We've heard discussion. This 2.5 years, we've heard several promises that we'll get it to Parliament before this period, etc. All those promises have been broken. We're no closer to getting discussion, public debate on a model that the government intends to pursue. And so one time we thought the minister was going full speed with this, out of concerns that enough was not being done for local people. And then suddenly, in the last article, I saw a little switch. And so I don't know whether we're going to get this draft anytime soon, and whether vested interest is already dictating the drafting of this legislation. A vested interest may be doing this because these people can get large, it's a youth sector, and so they can be influenced heavily. And so that's the second element. And then the third element is the sovereign wealth fund. Now, you heard when Trotman had his meltdown in Parliament. He said the Norwegian model is outdated. So no one in the world believes this. No one in the world. In fact, it's the most successful model in the world that has separated the management of oil resources from the politicians. It's done technically, and the procedures are clear, so political people don't get their hands on the money. It's the most successful model in the world. And it also avoided the destruction of the rest of the economy through the Dutch disease. Most countries have just gone down the path that has seen, in fact, a decrease in national wealth. So if you don't believe that we're going with this model, what are you proposing? So we're yet to see the draft of this sovereign wealth fund that they're going to bring forward with this enlightened new model that he's talking about. So that's on the architecture. Now in terms of the agreement itself. So we've heard a lot of things. Just in today's paper again, in a very clever way, we saw Trotman saying, giving some of the reasons we said in the beginning, that in 1999, we didn't have anything in the country. We're pushing people to explore because for years since independence, we had these resources. We're not getting exploration dollars flowing into the sector. And without exploration dollars flowing into the sector, you couldn't find oil because you have to explore to find. So we had one foray with CGX, and then you know how that ended up. It got delayed for almost 10 years when we had to go to the International Court, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. We had a favorable ruling, and we had the border demarcated, the maritime boundary with Suriname demarcated. But we lost almost 10 years of exploration there. In the meantime, most of the others who we just put a hold on their exploration activities. So it was a different environment. So he gave some reasons about that, seemingly favorable to the PDP. But then he comes back towards the end and he says, well, we inherited this agreement. We can't do much about it because we are not, he doesn't say, implying that somehow it's a bad agreement. We can't do much about this because we are forced to, when governments change, to honor contractual obligations, particularly with foreigners. I thought with everyone, not only with foreign companies, but you should honor contractual obligations with everyone. But they don't seem, they can violate contracts every day here. They took away from the 41 Afro-Guyanese families. That was a contract with them too. When they had the lease, then they took it away. Thankfully, the people got back their land. They couldn't honor that, but only the foreign companies. But that's a discussion for another day, because those are contracts too. So he says that, and he says, then he goes on to explain that this production sharing agreement could be dated as a model, and that the cabinet is reviewing now, this cabinet, which has no technical skill, is reviewing whether they will change the model of the agreement. So we explored someone of strict royalties and a whole range of other things. So The point he is making is this agreement was signed, they're saying, it's PPP, they're telling people in the bottom houses across the country that if PPP put in this secrecy clause, you can't get this agreement. That's the only reason we can't give people, and we have to honor it, and that we will do better in the future. Now, you have to honor the content, not the secrecy, I believe, because I believe that generally when you negotiate, you should have a period of secrecy. But once the contract has come to an end, then the agreement can be made public by the government. And so today, in light of all that they have said, I have been on the record already asking them to release everything that they said we were not transparent about. So to release the airport contract and the revised contract to the airport. To release the Marriott contract, because these are available to governments. We have been saying this for over a year now, been saying there's nothing that stopped them from releasing Baishandin contract or Sanata. I saw those in the prayer, but nothing stopping them, nothing absolutely. They can release them tomorrow. I've even asked that they release the evaluation report for the road contract to the hydropower, because you remember they were saying that we gave it preferentially to FIP Motilal to release that evaluation report. The government has to stop hiding behind secrecy. Secondly, on the oil and gas contracts, I've heard them saying now they added a new dimension. Because when the president himself said that you can should release all the contracts except those that had national security implication. Now we see a new thing creeping into the lexicon of the AFC people, that they can't release the oil and gas contracts because it would have national security implication with Venezuela. How would that have national security implication with Venezuela? This agreement and the contract governs the extraction of the resources. Venezuela probably knows all that ExxonMobil found. In fact, it's public record. This is a traded company. It's traded on the stock exchange. It's a huge company. It declares all of these things. It makes it known public. Venezuela knows about what the resources are out there and what has been found. We have given this contract out in exercise of our sovereignty because that's our territory. So there is nothing secret about that. The coordinates of the contract are all laid out in the agreement. So what is secret? It's the production agreement. Now Venezuela could say you had a bad agreement there, we have a better one. But it has no national security implication. But they're trying to morph this to fit into what the president said. So by ascribing now a national security reason for the non-release of these contracts on oil and gas. So in light of all that they are blaming the PPP for, we will defend what we put in contracts. But they have a duty to release all the contracts, so that they're not unfair to ExxonMobil too, that they should release all the contracts signed by the People's Progressive Party, as well as what they're doing now in the extractive industries, which would come in the future. And we will support them if they're claiming legislation is preventing them, etc. Tomorrow, as soon as we come out of Parliament, we'll first vote in favor of them to have legislation that reveals everything. If they're saying that, if that's the excuse. But no company in the world will walk away because the government as a policy decision decided or decides to reveal all the contracts that they have signed with the government to the public. But you have to do it in a fair manner, not just for ExxonMobil, release all of the others, especially in the oil and gas industries, so that their competitors don't see what, and use what is in one agreement to try to negotiate better agreements. It should release everything. That would be there. And then that will put everything to rest. But the way I see it being dealt with, they're sniping somehow at us. We are the reasons for the non-release. You're in government now. You made a campaign promise to people. Well, fulfill your campaign promise. We will support it. Like we will support your campaign promise to give the sugar workers a salary increase and everything else, and the public servant and the old age pensioners, which they moved away from. But all the campaign promises. President said, I didn't promise any jobs. That's somebody else's thing, not the public sector. I never promised that. So that's my position here. And then, there's nothing wrong with a visit by ministers abroad to any company. But it is, if the government says we want to come and visit your company, I doubt any company that operates in Guyana that has as its interlocutor the state or the government would say, no, we don't want you to come. Our problem with that visit was that it had to be discovered. It was discovered. It was not revealed. The government should say, especially given the sensitivities around oil and gas industry and charges about government officials being bribed and stuff like around the world. They had an obligation to say, we will be visiting Houston for these reasons, and here are members of the delegation. And then there would have been no issue. So it had to be discovered. And secondly, when we looked at the composition of the delegation, if it was a technical briefing, how come there are no technical person on the team? And so Gaskin has become the specialist. Gaskin and Patterson and Greenidge and Trotman and all the specialists in the industry. Those issues are so complex that they must have been at sea when the presentations are made. And even for technical people, sometimes the presentations are hard because it's a new sector. We have 5 politicians going off to look at our interests with no technical person there to advise them. This is something that is very, very worrying. Now, we have another commission of inquiry, as you've seen this one. The latest one is on African ancestral lands, Amerindian lands, and any other land. So it's our land in the country. You know our position on this matter right from the beginning. We said it's a wedge issue, that you can appoint a commission on African ancestral lands, separate from commission in the involvement of Amerindian people's lands. The two did not need to go forward. We have seen in the public domain that the Amerindian organizations, the NTC, the PPP, all called on the president not to swear in the commission before he consults. He went ahead and swore in the commission. He gave them terms of reference that they didn't consult on. They decided the terms of reference. Then when the outcry came, he put a hold on one section that is delay the consideration of Amerindian land issues to move forward on the other matters before the COI. But you have read the threats, and it's a pattern, and I see this as a pattern of behavior. First, my first impression, oh, Pradoville again, I thought they were going to charge us soon. They had completed the investigations. And that would be one of the first things a commission of this nature to look at general issues surrounding land will come to Pradoville. But I've come to the conclusion that wherever I live, that something will happen there. So it's not, now I've reconsidered, having read today's paper, that it had nothing to do with Pradoville. In fact, that came to the commission through some of their activists. So it's my impression of the commission itself at the beginning was that it was a commission that was set up to do a hatchet job. But I realized that the commission has to tackle issues that come to it. And so they brought this issue of the area in where I live, etc., being African ancestral lands, but based on one person's record, but he said he found in the archives that even Soku couldn't verify. But that's an aside, because the bigger plan is being revealed. And it started off with the minister's speech in Parliament, which has been endorsed by this government. Scott said that Eric Phillips' analysis is accurate, and they embraced the analysis of this person who is an advisor within the government. And his analysis is that, and you've seen it laid bare today, that some tribes didn't come here, like the white people shouldn't have gotten their lands because they came after Afro-Guyanese, etc. So, but in almost a racially inflammatory way, putting this over. So that analysis has been embraced. Secondly, today, when you look at what we see coming out of Eric Phillips's presentation, you realize that this is a wedge issue again, which I initially thought, but then maybe I said I'm maybe too suspicious. This is to ensure that we never have social cohesion, or we never have people working together. Because now what you're doing is you're putting people of Amerindian descent and African descent suddenly at conflict with each other when there was none. Most people in Guyana, ordinary people, have gone past that, have gone past those issues. But now in this racially inflammatory way, and look at who appearing before the commission now, in almost a racially inflammatory way, putting out, saying who came before, who got too much, etc. Starting to generate a feeling among Afro-Guyanese that, and I think this is their objective, that this government defends Afro-Guyanese interests. Well, let me tell you now, it has nothing to do with defense of Afro-Guyanese interests. It has to do with a political strategy. Because they recognize that people are people who supported them, including many Afro-Guyanese, are very, very disappointed with their performance. So how do you bring people back to the fold that's in their work thinking? Is that you play the race card again. You play the race card again, not policy. And so you say you're defending interests, but It's not going to happen in the future. If you come up with the African ancestral lands, that's why at the beginning I asked, how would a report on that, just a report, help the young kid in South Georgetown who just lost his job or who is looking for a job? How would it help him? Will he get land? What this will end up to is creating jobs for these the people, the Phillips and the others. And it will not solve a single issue that people face on the ground. All people of Guyana, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian people. None of them, and other races, mixed people, whatever. None of them will have their problems solved. So this is a wedge issue. It's being worked on as a political strategy to say to Afro-Guyanese, we are defending your interests. How could reparations come from Guyana? The British High Commissioner just said, move on. I didn't see a whimper from the government when the entire CARICOM said we should seek reparations from them. They enslave our people. They brought the indentured servants here. They also enslaved the Amerindian people, took away their lands. Not a word from the same group about what the British High Commissioner said or what the British government, but they want reparations from the Guyana. Guyana must now pay reparations. So it's like going to St. Kitts or Nevis and say, the government now needs to pay reparation for injustices perpetrated by other people on our people. But it is, the reason they would not do that is because they have no interest in getting reparation, which is being debated for years. Burnham was there, and Mr. Hoyt. They didn't do this. They knew that it was not going to go anywhere. In fact, Afro-Guyanese now have more land than in 1992 at their disposal. More land at their disposal than in 1992, when before that, from 1966, independence to 1992, PNC was in office by 2 Afro-Guyanese presidents, but it wasn't addressed. And so this issue is a wedge issue. I urge people in Guyana not to do it because it will set back race relations. Already we have issues. It will set back race relations for many, many years to come. And I suspect that's what they want, to keep people in camps. To keep people in camps. The social cohesion is a farce. It's a farce again. And so this is the motive behind all of this. Motive behind all of this. To say to ordinary Afro-Guyanese, oh, there's hope of a better day, like how they're saying oil will come in the future. And therefore, regardless of all the corruption and the mismanagement, etc., you stick with us because we're looking out for your interest, not looking out for nobody's interest. Nobody's interest. So I made it clear where the PPP is on this. We fight hard to change our party to make sure that we work in every community, that our party broadens its base. I publicly acknowledge that mainly our support comes mainly from Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian too, but it's a deficiency. We have to fix it. We have to go work more hard in communities, bring in people more. The party is open to that, and that's where we are working, to bring people together and to focus on a common future. That's the only future we have, a common future. And so that's how I see the COI now, that it's being converted, used as an opportunity to divide our people further. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, and we are from Channel 2 Headline News. I've got 4 quick, easy questions. Number 1, did you indeed put a confidentiality clause in the ExxonMobil contract? Number 1. Number 2, what percent, because Minister Jordan said that you negotiated 1% and he happened to push it to 2%.
Yeah.
What percent, now that oil has been found, do you think is a reasonable percent? Because when we heard that Mr. Trotman said 380 million, we must understand that Exxon is making 98% more than 380 million. Okay? Because we only getting 2%. So that's the second question. The third question is, why did you not release the contract when it was your purview to do that? And then finally, I just came from the National Tissue Council meeting, Tissue Council meeting that they're having. And Mr. Lennox Schumann likened the Tissue or the Amerindian people to a parrot. He said that when the PP government was in power, you all clipped their wings. And that this government came in and immediately gave them back their wing, only to now clip it again. And he said that he would have liked if you could come and address the issues for what they think you did or the PPP did under your administration. So if you can quickly...
The 4 issues, so you need to remind me. The last one, so that's fresh in my mind. I would love to go today, now. If they call me to the Two Shows meeting now, I would wrap up this press conference and go to that meeting because I believe we can defend our track record. You heard what Eric Phillips said. Eric Phillips said the 2006 act that was passed by the PPP was an act of reparation for Amerindian people. So how does that square up with the rhetoric of clipping the wings? When the PPP passed an act of reparation, we were just fulfilling a historical comment. The minister said Amerindians must not have subsurface rights. In 2006, Amerindians were given subsurface rights under the Act, the PPP Act, one of the few countries in the world, so that in their title land they can control the mineral resources. So, secondly, we made sure that the village councils in that act, that they had the powers to manage their own affairs. That was an act of greater autonomy on the part of the villages to give them greater powers to manage their affairs. We also enshrined in that act a process that will obligate the state to address the land issues once they came up, because the state from 1969 sat on the issues, the commitments that were made around independence time to the people. These were commitments made since independence, around independence. And we are just fulfilling. So how is that? Caroline Rodriguez said in 2001, I remember the speech, Amerindian Heritage. We had one Amerindian doctor at that time. By the time we left office, we had over 100. In 14 years that changed. Who built the new secondary schools and the dormitories in the hinterland? And so that Amerindian children could then go there to have secondary education. Every community had a health hut. Who started the village development plan? We extended the demarcation activities. We put in every home a solar panel in those areas. It's not just about talk, it's about action. This government, the solar panels we bought for the hinterland to complete the riverine and hinterland territories, took them and put them in the same state house. That's how they're addressing it. They have not, 2.5 years, they shut down the titling activities. Practically shut it down. Handed in took away 1,972 jobs. That's over 700 million per year from the village economy. 2 weeks after they got in office by firing those people. How come they said, and they replace it with 28,000 shoes. And carry the Amerindians on that day, last week, to the park, to Durban Park, the corrupt facility there that they had, because they want to use it more often, to hand over 3 buses to coastal people. They must witness handing over 3 buses to coastal people. The people said to me, we thought we were going to get the buses. So I would love to talk about our record. And if that was an invitation for me to go, I'm gone. but I have not received that, because even when we extended invitations, there's the government shows up in full force to prevent people from coming. So that's, we prepared to defend our record. What's the second issue? Go from the bottom. Yeah.
Did you indeed put a confidentiality clause in the ExxonMobil contract?
Most contracts have confidentiality clauses that govern the negotiating period. I'm saying now our position. If we were deficient, that's what they campaign on that the PPP was deficient. It was not tabling all these contracts. You are the guardians of transparency. Imagine they are defending this more than we are. They were supposed to be different. So what is the third one?
What is a reasonable percentage? You negotiated 1%.
Yeah. The thing is that Jordan is not saying they did 2%. But if you look at the agreement, I think Starboard News had the agreement already on their website. The agreement says that that what you collect as royalty will be deducted from your share of profit oil. So all that it does, if it's 1% or 2%, you just get the money up front, a little bit more up front. But at the end of the day, in the wash, it's the same thing. And this is what they're toying with. They're saying, oh, we negotiated a better deal. So release the contract we signed, which is already in the public domain, and let's see what your renegotiated contract is. They're saying they did a better job. So let's see how much better you did. That is what we're arguing. And that's
why did you I guess you answered the question. You didn't release. Okay. Thank you.
As it relates, sorry, Shanta Samuel's friends, as it relates to the list you have submitted, if the government again rejects this list, what's your thinking? What's the next move?
I don't want to speculate, but I hope that in light of the Chief Justice's ruling, that the government will select someone from this list, and we had issued a statement that there was supposed to be a high-level group to meet to discuss this issue. Unfortunately, the government didn't convene it so far. And so we're hoping that, first of all, that we will need to get to that the president will choose from this list.
Okay. And for news purposes, can you just give us a team?
You will get a press release later in the day. And I don't want them to say that I'm releasing stuff to the press before I release to the government. You know, it's a letter to the president, and I have to be respectful of the office.
Mr. Jagdeo, James Matthews, can you say whether many retired judges are on the list of somebody?
Oh, no, I'm not getting into speculation. You get it by the end of the day.
What do you believe that you just fit the president's criteria or not?
Well, you heard the Chief Justice's criteria.
So you're basically confident in your submission?
The Chief Justice's, because I believe the courts interpret our Constitution.
But the president believes that the Chief Justice's interpretation is, aren't really contradicting each other, so he maintains his understanding.
And that will be a problem if the president believes he is the ultimate arbiter of in interpreting the Constitution, because that is a huge issue.
Mr. Jagdeo, I just came from...
All right, let me give a fresh. Anyone else? Yes.
Regarding tax policy you mentioned earlier, from the half-year report, about 8% of revenue came from taxes, right? What's your take on that? And secondly, has this ever happened before in terms of such a large amount of revenue coming from taxes?
Yeah, most revenue comes from taxes, so it's not unusual. It is not unusual. What is bothersome is that almost all the sectors are declining. All the sectors are declining, and then we're still faced with, I don't know what passes off for economic policy. they pass off for economic policy. One time we're doing badly with taxes, another time we're doing better. Now, what I know is that if the economy is growing less than the anticipated rate that was programmed, but your revenue is growing faster, that means the government is taking a greater share of national wealth than economic growth, particularly in the nominal sense when you add inflation to real growth. So that is what I know is happening, but I saw the reduction in reserves, and you know how the government has kept the exchange rate stable when it started sliding. It didn't do that based on the fundamentals of the economy, supply and demand for currency, which sets the market. What it did, it called in the banks. First of all, it sent an illegal directive to the cambio saying to them, you can't sell with a spread of greater than $3. Next, it called in the cambios and said, you can't buy for more than $2.50. And then it called in the exporters and said to them, gold guys, rice exporters, forestry exporters, if you sell for more than $2.50, although the people can get $2.30 in the market, they were getting already, we will take away your licenses to export. So it was bullying them. That's how the market stabilized through what I term executive fiat, not by market conditions. And that's why it's so tenuous. It's so tenuous because once you remove those restrictions, the rate will slide. Because especially in the face of us losing reserves. The reserves have come down below $600 million now. Losing reserves because the exports are not doing that well. And fuel imports have gone up. Most of the sectors are underperforming. So we're going to lose many, many more jobs. There is nothing outside. I saw the British High Commissioner maybe in a veiled way said the NDS, they're prepared to support its development. But I think what he was implying that we don't know what this government is doing. He didn't want to say it, but I read the article and it looked like he was saying, well, governments have to define things, etc. Things are not being defined. Man, and he's right, if that's his impression. Not being defined. Okay. Yes, I can come back to you if you. Oh, yeah.
Again, sir, the president has accused councillors of not cooperating with other councillors and even member officials from the district communities. Is the BBB ready to review their members in light of the upcoming election?
This is another flight of fancy of the president. I don't know which circle. He seemed to surround himself with this incestuous circle, incestuous, incompetent circle that includes Bulkan and the Attorney General. And therefore bad decisions are made. So, I don't know, we have gone on record 100 times talking about our willingness to work at these levels. But I pointed out when they were establishing the national consultative body for the RDCs and how the regional chairman, we controlled 7 of them, they were told to come to a meeting and then to hear that they're launching this body. They will be parading flags that they don't agree with. That we don't agree with. You know, the balkanization of Guyana with many flags. And what will happen is that they will participate in a process that will reduce their powers, their constitutional and legal powers in the region as regional chair and vice chair and the RDC by agreeing to a consultative mechanism with the co-chaired by the head of the municipality. So in Letem, suddenly you would have the mayor of Letem co-chairing a regional body with a regional chairman. So his jurisdiction then gets extended to the entire region. But he is only appointed in that area, in the municipality, when the regional chairman is appointed or elected from the whole region. So that's why they didn't participate. And the same thing with the Guyana Association of Mayors or something like that. GAM? Is it GAM? Yeah, or municipalities. We were ready to go, and then a week before that, the president, all of our people made presentations for preparing, and then the president went in defiance of a court order and swore in the mayor of Mabaruma in defiance of a court order, an illegal act, and he was going to be at the conference, and we could not go there and participate in an act of illegality. You know how the councillors in Region 5, one Carol Joseph or something like that, and a few others. It's Joseph or yeah. How he broke up meetings for months, almost a year they didn't function. We have another one in Enmore, the NDC there. He breaks up the meetings and the police don't take any action because these are political people. Have you ever heard of PVP people breaking up one of these meetings or disrupting these meetings? But if the people don't show up and pay homage to the president like that, then he thinks it's disrespect. They're busy too. Now, many times I went to communities as president, people didn't show up, and so what? You get on with your work, you come back home, you know, all this pomp and pageantry and everything else that you're accustomed to. Half of the police force lines up. They can't be doing work, catching criminals and maintaining law and order, because when the president or the prime minister goes out somewhere, it looks like half of the police force is there. That's where they are. And so I think if everybody, the work must shut down and everyone, PPP councillor, must appear, wear a short jacket or a suit and tie and appear when the president goes to a region. Well, that's not how we work. And then they undermine the budgets too. The RDC submits budgets, they cut the budgets unilaterally. Now I heard the president saying to other people, you can get money, go directly to the Minister of Finance, submit proposals. Not through their representative leaders now, the region, undermining the constitutional structures. You can go and get money from the Minister of Finance. This is what passes off for governance. And now, what excuse do they have for not putting in place the local government commission? The minister said, we didn't consult with all the parties in parliament when I submitted the first set of names, that the law requires that. Imagine I have to consult with them for my nominee too. So I said, all right, let's correct it. We did. I resubmitted the names of the 3 individuals. We went through the consultative process. We met with Mr. Trotman, not the older Trotman. And now we've resubmitted. He said their nominees are still being considered by the cabinet. They've had a year since local government elections, it's over a year, to consider a nominee. Up to now, the cabinet can't decide on their nominees because they do not want to establish the local government commission, although they promised this, because the minister now exercises the power and control over the regions and everybody. And so the president needs to update himself with what's going on. He needs to surround himself with other people who will give him a different perspective. Basil is messing them up legally, well, and then this Vulcan is another story. Anything else? If not, thank you.
No, a quick question. I just came from a meeting, the Center for Local Business Development. Exxon is funding an agency in Guyana to provide training to all businesses who would like to be trained. And Exxon is funding it. At the meeting, a person asked a question. They said, even though the training is free, is it not true that Exxon is paying for the training? And the representative there admitted that Exxon will be paying for the training, which will be billed to the Ghana government by proxy because it will come out of the monies that Exxon has to take for their investment. As a businessman, you a finance man, How does Guyana know how much money Exxon is investing so they would know how much money when Exxon has gotten back their investment?
Well, these are the matters. That's why that the government should concern itself with. It should have clarity. It should say, if you're establishing a business incubator, is this being done by ExxonMobil itself? That would not be part of our, bill for the future. If that's being done, they can spend as much money as they want and hire who they want. If it's going to be billed to us in the future as part of our share of costs, then they're required to go through a process, and the government must know of that process.
And that is not built into the contractual arrangement?
Yes.
That's the concern.
No. But this is where clarity comes. That's why I was saying that we need to develop a capacity to do that. And the GRA is not the best place. They don't have the capacity in there. And the government ministers need to ask these questions. So you should ask Trotman, have you asked about this as minister? Have you asked ExxonMobil what share of it? And are you satisfied that they're going through the right process? So you should ask him. He has responsibility for the sector. I can only say what I believe he should do. But I don't know with him too.
Thank you.
All right.